We're going to talk about today a little bit twist on our topic. It's going to be careful what you sow. And let me just start off by saying we know this, but Jesus was a master communicator, right? His followers knew exactly what he was trying to say. They understood. He used common examples of a lot of the farmers, shepherds, fishermen, and carpenters. He spoke in ways that they could certainly understand him. And we all know today from our own personal experiences that just because someone is a communicator doesn't mean that they're an effective communicator. Putting someone up in the front of a room or an auditorium and giving them a microphone is not an indication they're an effective speaker, as I remind you every week. To be an effective communicator, the listener must be able to understand. It's a two-way requirement. And along the way, there are lots of things that can make a communication ineffective. One of them can be that there's different life experiences. The speaker has one set of life experiences and those listening have another. Maybe there's different levels of knowledge. Maybe education's a little different. Perspectives a little bit different. How they grew up, where they grew up. All those factors kind of come into play. Language is a factor, right? Cultures are a factor. And what's so significant about Jesus and his communications is that even 2,000 plus years ago, his communications were effective with his audience, and they're effective with us today, a long time later. And the simplicity of Jesus' speech might have been captured with these words, "And the common people heard him gladly." Other versions just say the crowd listened with delight. He knew the importance of communicating effectively. He knew the importance of connecting with the audience. And he knew their life experiences would be one way that he could connect with them. Hence the farmers and the fishermen, carpenters, etc. Paul offered another view of this. 1 Corinthians said, "Unless you speak with intelligible words with your tongue, how will anyone know what you're saying? You will just be speaking in the air." And you know, as I got to thinking about this lesson, I thought about that a little bit. And I thought, well, I probably ought to extend some empathy to all of y'all trying to listen to me and my West Texas twang every week. And as it is difficult for you, and we're all probably common in many, many, many ways, can you imagine what it would have been like with my coworkers back in the days before I retired? And I'm talking to people in Asia, in Europe, Middle East, Africa. How about them trying to understand my West Texas twang? And then you throw in some conference calls, some video conferences, where you can't see the body language, you can't see the facial expressions. Makes it a little complicated. And you know, our company always required individuals. We were an American company, so our company all required individuals to speak in English. So everybody spoke English, but some that English is not their first language, those communications can be a little challenging, right? Cultures can be challenging. You know, when we were doing these conference calls, and I would hold meetings with people, and if I'm holding a meeting with you or on a teleconference, all of us are in a teleconference, and I say, does anybody have any questions? There's a fair likelihood that somebody would speak up uninhibited and speak up and say, yeah, I have a question. Would you explain this? But in some cultures, that's just not the case. If they don't understand, they just keep their mouths shut. So you never know if the communication is effective or not effective. I can talk to you today, and I can see from your facial expressions and your body language if I'm connecting with you or not, or if you're just tolerating me. But for those that are streaming with us, and there are a number that stream with us, I don't have any idea whether I'm connecting with them or not. So I say all of that to say that even if everything is communicated in plain English, we're looking right at each other. We have common experiences. It doesn't mean we're always going to be on the same page in our communications, right? So I probably took this a little too far, but I'm going to play a little game with you this morning. If I put this word up on the screen, Most of you are probably thinking, yeah, I know what that means. But if I were to say, what does this mean in the context of a hospital emergency room, would you know what is being talked about? What if I said, spill the tea? For those of you that are my age and older, you know what spill the tea is, right? You get your cup of coffee or your cup of tea too full, and those old age tremors make it hard to not spill, right? I certainly understand now why my grandmother used to put tea and coffee in saucers. When I was young, I didn't understand that, but now I understand that. But if we had some teenagers in here today and I said spill the tea, are they going to know what I'm talking about? Because to them, that means, let me hear, what's the gossip? What's the latest? I want to know. What if I use the term worm? In my line of work, which was the old business, worm was not referring to those little creepy crawly things on the ground, right? It was referring to those that were inexperienced. And when you're in a high-risk work environment, it's always a good idea to know those that may be a little inexperienced because you want to be especially careful with them. Because if they do something they're not supposed to do, it could have some catastrophic consequences. What if I throw this up here? Anybody here know what I'm talking about? I know Jason does. If you play football or you're a football coach, you probably have an idea what this means. But if you don't, you have no clue, right? Well, for those of you that don't, I tried to explain it. Jason, did I get it right? A lot of football teams provide numerical designations for the routes the receivers run. 6, 8, and 6 is an X, Y, and a Z receiver. F-stop is for the fullback, and the 2 is the count, signaled count for the center to snap the ball. What about this one? I see a few heads nodding on this one. If you're like me, you learned about this the hard way. Not safe for work. If you don't know what that means, if you get an email or an instant message with capital letters that say NSFW, what they're telling you is it's probably going to embarrass you if you open whatever they sent you in the presence of an office. And if it's not safe for work, it's probably not safe for home. So that's just a simple message to file away. And I say all of that, I went a lot of trouble to say all of that to say this. It's true, right? Sometimes we're not communicating effectively. We say things, people other things, hear something else. And you know, this morning I had way too much fun with putting all this together, but I got on a rabbit trail and I couldn't necessarily stop. And the thing I was trying to stress to everybody is we go to the grocery store, we go to school, we go to work, we come here, we pass people walking on the trails, and we're constantly talking to them, right? We say things all the time. Are we communicating a message that anybody can understand? And you're probably thinking this morning, well, that's all interesting, and I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but what does that have to do with being careful what we sow? And I say that to say this. The definition of sowing is simply to scatter, to spread, to disperse, to strew, and disseminate. And we go about every day doing a lot of this, right? And very seldom do we ever stop and think about the audience. What are other people hearing? You know, if you're a farmer, you don't just take a handful of seeds and just throw them out there. You generally like to know what it is you're throwing and where you're putting it, right? But I don't think many of us really think about that in the words we say. We just kind of say stuff, right? And sometimes we wish we hadn't said it because it's not the right thing or the right place, but we can't do anything about it once it's out there. Teachers are dispersing daily. Jeannie knows this. I mean, probably says, I don't know how many words we say in a day, but you kind of wonder how many of those words we say in a day are really good words, positive, helpful. And how many of those things we say may be doing more damage than what we realized or thought about. And I say that to say we need to be thinking about the things we say. Why? Because a word sown in a heart can bring forth a result. It can bring forth a deed. It can bring forth a harvest. You know, we talked about this in our very first class together. Remember, thoughts lead to words. Words lead to actions. Actions, once repeated, become habits, and those habits become our character. Lots and lots of seeds we're throwing out there every day. So today I thought it might be useful to spend a few minutes just exploring some of the ways that we sow daily and why we need to exercise some caution. We know there is beauty in soothing words. There are harvests from the words we sow. There is power in telling the truth. Sometimes a truthful word said at just the right time and in just the right way can calm and diffuse a really tense situation. And we talked about this a few weeks ago in James chapter 3 about the little tongue and what it can do. It can, wrong thing said can light a fire, start a fire, and if it's calming and efficient, it can diffuse problem things. And every time we open our mouth, we're spewing something out. We are spreading seeds every time we open our mouth. And another way I even put on here that we sometimes spread our seeds come out of our mouth and all is through our example. In many ways, our words are doing nothing more than supporting our example, right? So let's dig into a few of these this morning, look at these a little bit more. Beauty of soothing words. I doubt anybody in here takes any exception to this. Everybody knows that, right? And we've all had cases in our lives where we're going through rough stages. Things aren't going particularly well. And somebody out of the clear blue sends you a text message or a phone call or an email that encourages you. And how does that make you feel? Makes you feel good, doesn't it? It seems like it always comes at just the right time for us to hear those things. You know, many of you, particularly I know your moms, and some of you dads may do it too, drop little notes in your kids' lunches from time to time. And why are you doing that? You're doing that to encourage them. And I'm telling you, those little guys will remember it. We remember these little pick-me-ups for a long time. I know some of you catch me between classes or after classes, or I get emails from time to time saying the class or something we touched on was an encouragement to you, or it helped you, or you're glad we talked about it. And when you do that, it's very much encouraging to me. I appreciate that. But I will tell you again, and I mentioned it to you before, Sarah and I have both lost our parents, but there's not many days that go by that we wish we didn't have another 10 minutes or another 15 minutes to talk to them again, to encourage them, just to listen, just to be there with them. So this week, you got a new week starting this week. Take the time to reach out to somebody you love and care about and make their day. Say something positive to them, encourage them. What does it mean, harvest from the words we sow? I know you're getting tired of me saying this, but I'm going to continue to say it. Whatever you're thinking about is going to come out eventually. And when you say something, you're going to spur people to work, to do something, to take an action. Maybe it's your own self. And if we do those actions and they're not positive actions, they're going to be getting some bad habits, and those habits will become our character, and that's how people are going to remember us. Second Corinthians 9:6, whoever sows sparingly will reap sparingly. You know, we tend to associate this scripture with giving, rightly so. But doesn't it apply to encouraging words too? How many of you make a habit of sending encouraging notes and words to other people? And when that happens, when you're having a rough spell, what happens? They come back to you. So if you're never getting those encouraging words or notes from anybody, maybe start by sharing a few encouraging words or notes with other people. You'd be surprised at what it plants, and they'll come back to you. You know, when Sarah and I first started attending Woodland Oaks, it was about 24 years ago. And there was a special lady here that attended at Woodland Oaks by the name of Goldie Denson. I don't know if too many of you, I know Patricia probably remembers her. Not too many of you may have been around at that time. But what I remember Goldie for is that if we ever missed a service, she would call us. It didn't matter if it was Sunday morning, Sunday evening, or Wednesday. Jeannie probably remembers too. And she didn't say anything that would discourage you, but you knew when she called you, she had one question. Where were you? Why were you not there? And I see some heads nodding. You remember, she would call you and check on you. You didn't want a call from Goldie. You didn't want her to ask you where you had been. You didn't want to, because what answer can you give her, right? And you knew it was going to disappoint her, and you didn't want to get those calls. And I say that to say, here we are. Goldie passed away in 2004. That was 20 years ago. I'm still talking about Goldie, and a number of you remember Goldie. Do you think Goldie was spreading positive seeds in the words she shared? We still remember those things, right? You know, in this particular one, Eliphaz, one of Job's friends, made this statement, but it's true. If you play around with fire, it's eventually going to burn you, right? If you like to walk close to the edge, sooner or later you're going to fall in. If you're looking for mischief, you're going to find it. And we've looked at David and some others that when you go looking for trouble, you're going to find it. And how about this one? Have you ever just known somebody that's just really cruel, mean? When you see them coming down the pathway towards you, what do? You go the other direction. You don't want to have any interaction with them, right? Positive seeds. You know, another aspect of this is wanting to be a truth teller. The Lord detests lying lips. He delights in people who are trustworthy. You know, I don't have this one on the screen, but another one is Proverbs 12:19. Truthful lips endure forever. A lying tongue lasts only a moment. If someone gets a reputation for not being truthful, do you ever believe anything they ever tell you? Not without a grain of salt, right? You just can't trust them. And how long does it take to regain that trust? It takes a while. Once you develop a habit of someone that's not trustworthy or reliable, it takes a while. And you know, sometimes when we say things that we know are untruthful, and I know the audience that's listening to me, I can go find that individual and say, hey, I told you something that wasn't true. You know, forgive me for what I said, or it wasn't wrong, it wasn't right, you should do this, you should do that. What about all those people standing nearby listening to you that you don't know, that the last words they heard from you were words that were not truthful? And it just goes back to the point we're saying things constantly and we don't give a lot of thought sometimes to people that are within earshot of us. Let's see what else. Oh, the other one I want to say on here, Matthew 5:37. All you need to say is yes. Anything beyond that comes from the evil one. You know, I know yes is a word in our vocabulary, and I know no is a word in our vocabulary. But I think to some kids, yes, but, or no, but, are words in the vocabulary, right? Did you hit your sister? No, but I would like to. Did you hit your sister? Yes, but they deserved it. So everything's got a clarifier on it. Yeah, and I know I'm driving a dead horse in the ground, and I realize that. I'm just trying to stress to everybody that we're constantly thinking stuff. We hear stuff all the time, and we got thoughts that are floating in our head. You got thoughts in your head right now floating around. And if they're not good thoughts, if we don't get rid of those and we allow them to fester and grow, they're eventually going to come out. You know, if you're thinking somebody, if you're up here thinking, well, he sure talks a lot, he sure talks a lot, he sure talks a lot. Eventually that's going to come out, right? It's either going to come out in something I hear you say or somebody else is going to hear you say, and somebody else is going to say that. And I just say that to try to drive home a point that I don't think we give a lot of thought a lot of times to all the words we say. We say lots and lots of stuff, and we just don't think about it too often. And that's all I'm trying to establish today is there's a lot of things that we say, we don't give a lot of thought to it. We just need to stop and think about it sometimes. You know, the other twist on all of this is where I was going with this next thought, and that is sometimes it's not just a truthful word, being a truth teller. Sometimes it's about saying some calm and peaceful words to diffuse a situation. And, you know, Acts 5 is one. For those of you that can, find Acts 5 sometime and reread it. I didn't put it up on the screen today. It's long. But the intent of it was, you remember the Jewish leaders were furious. And they were furious at the apostles because they wouldn't quit talking about Jesus. And Peter and John had been strictly warned to quit talking about him. And they kept on. And they were arrested, placed in jail. Angel came, took them out of jail, told them to go stand in the temple courts and teach. And so the next morning, the guards of the Sanhedrin wanted to see them. Guards went to retrieve them. They weren't in their cells. You can already see the kind of chaos starting to develop, right? And somebody told them, well, they're out in the temple courts speaking. So they go grab them, pull them in before the Sanhedrin. Brought them before the Sanhedrin and said, we gave you strict orders not to teach in his name. Of course, Peter lit into them, as Peter is wont to do, and scolded them, said, we have to obey God, not man. And oh, by the way, you killed Jesus, and he let them know about that. And as you would expect, the Jewish leaders were fit to be tied. In fact, the text says they were furious and wanted to put them to death. But there was a Pharisee named Gamaliel there, respected, stood up, said, take those men out for a minute, I want to talk to you. So he told the others, and this is some of the words that he said up above. I advise you, leave these men alone, let them go, for if their purpose or activity is of human origin, it will fail. But if it is from God, you will not be able to stop these men. You will only find yourself fighting against God. Now, this whole story has so many lines and trails on it, we could spend multiple classes just talking about. And you almost hate to even mention the story without talking about the apostles and their courage. But that's not my topic today. I'm going to say that for another day. I'm just trying to draw the attention to you've got a situation that had enormous drama around it. Mystery, intrigue, miraculous acts, suspense, threats, highly energized, frenzied public spectacle, and one individual calmed the whole thing. And it's not that he said anything really to protect the apostles, right? He just said it as a matter of law. But God used him to blunt the murderous intentions of the Sanhedrin. And there's another one, if you want to read it, over in Acts 19. This one is a little different, but it's similar. It was in Ephesus. A silversmith named Demetrius was concerned about his livelihood and the things that Paul was saying. Throw him in the mix with a priest there that was violently opposed to Christianity. And that crowd, at that one says, the text says, it swelled to about 20 to 25,000. And you had a town clerk that spoke up and calmed and diffused the situation. And in fact, in that one, verse 19, I noted down there, the assembly was in confusion. Some were shouting one thing, some another, and most of the people didn't even know what they were there for. You read that, and you kind of look at our news today, and you see all the accounts of all the riots and chaos and stuff going on. And sometimes they interview those individuals, and they had no clue what they're there for. We were told to be here to create havoc, and that's what we chose to do. But 2 hours of chanting wasn't enough to calm the crowd, but a few words of a town clerk was able to. And I say all of that to say, God uses us all to calm and diffuse tense situations, every single one of us. We've got a highly charged, highly political environment in the society we live in, and he desperately needs us to use our calming influence to help squelch some troublesome times. And I want you to just think about this for a minute. And I know it's simple, and I know it's something we take for granted, but we're constantly tossing seeds every day. Constantly saying stuff. A man reaps what he sows. Words are being randomly tossed out left and right. So the question is, are the seeds we're sowing every day, are they positive seeds or not? Are we encouraging others to love, to feel joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness? All out of Galatians 5 if you're interested. Or is it possible that some of the seeds we're sowing lead to some bad effects? I don't think we'd ever directly push anybody into doing any of these things here, but sometimes our words can spark an idea or a thought in someone to go off and do some things that they shouldn't do. And you know, I say these things about the good seed and the bad seed, and I mentioned earlier today, it could be a class setting, it could be school, it could be the grocery store, the neighborhood. Who knows? We just constantly talking to people and saying things. How about this one? This one kind of strikes me right at my core personally. I've got grandkids that I see on a fairly regular basis. Some of you have kids. Have you ever stopped to think about you are planting seeds with those kids for 18 to 20 years? Constantly planting seeds with those kids, 18 to 20 years, during the time of their life where they're fertile and their roots are taking hold. Kind of intimidating to think about it, isn't it? I think this is a bit eye-opening to me, and I sometimes wonder if we really have a grasp how powerful our words are around our kids. And I get it. I understand it. I've got kids. I've got grandkids, and sometimes you say things because you're frustrated, you're tired, you're in a hurry, and you say that probably wasn't the right thing to do. And I don't mean to put any more pressure on parents. I think parents already have enough pressure as it is. I'm just trying to stress that our words matter in saying things in the heat of a battle, things you might be thinking you didn't want to think. You kept saying, they're annoying me, they're annoying me, they're annoying me, but you're not saying it, but you're thinking it. Eventually it's going to come flying out, right? And kids remember. Kids do remember the smallest detail. And I'll give you an example. When I was young, me and my sister in our home, my mom kept a poem around in our house. I'm a little guy. She had a poem in our house. I remember it. It wasn't a decorative thing. It was a poem. And I would go by and I'd read it almost every day. And I've sometimes wondered why she had that poem hanging up. I'm not sure. I kind of wonder if maybe it was a reminder to her of the seeds she was spewing every day. But if you're interested, this was the poem. The name of the poem was Children Learn What They Live. And it was written by Dorothy Law Nolte. And it said, if children live with criticism, they learn to condemn. If children live with hostility, they learn to fight. If children live with fear, they learn to be apprehensive. If children live with pity, they learn to feel sorry for themselves. If they live with ridicule, they learn to feel shy. If they live with jealousy, they learn to feel envy. If they live with shame, they learn to feel guilty. Just a few negative seeds we could be sowing, and to be honest, I bet we're not even aware of it. I know I wasn't. On the flip side, though, if kids are living with encouragement, they learn confidence. If children live with tolerance, they learn patience. If children live with praise, they learn appreciation. If they live with acceptance, they learn to love. If they live with approval, they learn to like themselves. If children live with recognition, they learn it's good to have a goal. If children live with sharing, they learn generosity. If children live with honesty, they learn truthfulness. If children live with fairness, they learn justice. If children live with kindness and consideration, they learn respect. If children live with security, they learn to have faith in themselves and in those around them. If children live with friendliness, they learn the world is a nice place to live. If they live with serenity, they learn to have peace of mind. You know, I know my grandkids, I've got particularly one young one that's got boatloads of confidence, which suggests to me that she's getting a lot of encouragement. And this is not all, this is certainly not inspired words. These are just words that somebody wrote, but I think they're pretty accurate. And I do think it's something we need to stop and think about. Our words are having an impact, particularly on those little ones that are around us 18 to 20 years. And the final point I want to make this morning is this power of example. You know, I said simply that sometimes our words are just a reinforcement of our example. It's not the other way around. That's why our examples are so important. Sometimes people, if they see your example, I mean, you may say one thing, you may tell your kids. I've told some young dads this before, and I don't mean to be, I mean, I had as much problem with this as anybody, so I'm not telling it because I know better. I'm just telling you because I think it's true and it's accurate. But when you tell your young kids when you're little that God is my priority, but I don't live that. They see me all throughout the day doing things that indicates to them God is not my priority. Then you really think you telling them God is your priority is going to have an effect? It's not. And so if you don't live God, if God is not your priority and you're not living it, don't be surprised when your kids grow up and God is not their priority. That's a hard truth, but it's true. You've got to say it, you've got to do it, you've got to live it. You've got little eyes that are paying attention and watching you. So this ideal of impact, power of example, you know, we're all sitting in here today. Not all of us will be rich. Not all of us will be famous. Not all of us are going to have an influence with our pen, our words, our print. But every single one of us have the power of example. Every one of us. Not everyone recognizes the extent of our example. Not everyone always uses it for good. But whether we like it or not, our example leaves a mark. And my guess, if you're sitting in here today, you probably have a parent or a coach or a teacher or a scoutmaster, somebody that said something or done something in your past that you remember it to this day. You still think about it. And it bothers me when I hear some of our more influential people in our country, I say influential just because they're in the spotlight a lot, but athletes, entertainers, saying they're not role models. That's nonsense. If people are watching you, you're a role model. Every one of us up here are role models. And we can go to Scripture and we can see several notable examples, positive examples of faith. Just go to Hebrews 11 if you want to read a few. Go to the New Testament. Some of these names come to mind, right? Paul, Timothy, Peter, Barnabas, Titus. They all gave us examples. They're all giving us influence, and we're still drawing upon their influence and examples today. A few negative people along the way, though, right? Ahab, Jeroboam, Pharaoh. When I throw those names up here, their character comes to mind, right? And their character was reinforced in their evil thoughts, their actions, their habits. You know, when you talk about power of influence, negative influence, you know, it's not surprising that every one of the northern kingdom kings were evil, all following the trail of Jeroboam. And you know, sometimes even in the church, we can encounter those who love themselves and their ambitions more than they do God's truth. And their self-promotion, their personal desires can teach doctrines that are divisive to the body. And I think of all the sores in the world, these seem to be the ones that come under God's greatest displeasure. So I'm not sure where we are on time. Let me see. I may let you out a little bit early today. But that's where we are today. Every single one of us today are sowing seeds every day. Are we careful to sow positive seeds? Are we sowing seeds that are good and useful to our Lord? They're helping His kingdom grow. They're helping people grow. Yes, Glenn. And I'm telling you, I can't repeat all of what Glenn said for those of you streaming, but in essence is time. Busyness of life is pushing us to go faster and faster and faster, and we don't stop and think about some of the things we're doing, some of the things we say, and the impact it may be having. I'm just amazed that Glenn has such a gift of saying exactly what I need to be saying, right? I do have a lesson coming up on that one. I think it's about 2 or 3 weeks out. Being careful how you use your time. But Glenn is right on. He's right on. This world is busy. We're busy. We talked a little bit about that a few weeks ago when I showed you the sign of 1488. Remember? FM 1488? Going down 1488. It's so busy, so many distractions, that my son in the back said he saw a place to eat. He saw McDonald's and asked me to go to McDonald's. And I 1960, FM 1960. He could see it. I couldn't see it. And the reason he could see it is he was locked on. That's all he was looking for. That's what he was focused on. I'm looking on the cars. I'm trying not to get run over. I'm watching the overhead street signs. I'm trying to find an address on a building. I had a lot of busyness going on my drive that day. And I couldn't see what something that my 6-year-old sitting in the back seat could easily see. And I think there's a lesson in there for us in our Christian walks. Yeah. Travis did it too. He's going to talk. He just brought another topic I'm going to talk about in a few weeks. Maybe I didn't say it exactly right, but I mean, he's leading me to an area that I think is very important to us. And that is, I'm going to be talking in a couple of weeks about be careful what you post. Think about that one for just a minute, right? You're sitting in here, I can see you, I can say things to you, and I've got some indication whether it's getting through or not. But it's really comfortable to sit in your home, can't see everybody, and just spew out all sorts of words left and right, right? You don't think about where those words are going or those photographs are going. Now, the good news in all that is that God knew we weren't perfect. That's the good news. He knew we weren't perfect. That's why he sent Jesus. He gave us a hope. He gave us a pathway to salvation. But we need to just be mindful and be careful what we sow. We've got a lot of, you look at things going on in our world today, crazy stuff, right? Of course, you can go read the Old Testament too and see the same crazy stuff. It's just a little bit, the time is different, maybe the technology is different, but still crazy stuff. But it all comes down a lot of times to the things we're saying, the words we say, and I just hope I planted enough upon you as you go into the new week to be careful what you sow. That's all I've got this morning. I would like to close us with a prayer, and then I'm going to let you go enjoy some refreshments.